even a good school will have a graduation rate of 80 or 85%, or a proficiency rate that's lower than that. Typically, proficiency rates are lower than the graduation rates. So even if you think that that's a good school, let's just say, for example, that it's 80%. If you are using old traditional methods and averaging, that's still 20% of the students who are coming through your system who are ending up not being proficient. So in a school of 2,000 kids, that's 400 students. So in the traditional system, what we think of as a victory is still letting 400 students slide away, and it's only by using student-centered and standards-based approaches that you can actually really get at those 400 kids and meet them where they are, because I mean, typically they're not failing to succeed for no reason. There's a reason, and you have to be in relationship with that kid, with that student, and structurally student-centered and standards-based learning is the best way to do that. The other point, the other reason why it's a great idea, for why parents should be supporting it, is just student engagement itself. I mean, it's this strange phenomenon where people think it's okay for their kids to be miserable, and it's okay for their, well, I wasn't interested in school, so why should you have it any better? If you get so even the kids who are succeeding in schools now, they could succeed more if you could engage students more, and all of the research and all of the writings indicate that in a student-centered system you get more student engagement.
Also, in a practical matter, you sort of demystify what's going on in the classroom for the community to see who are the future workers and what they're going to be able to provide, and because so many of the careers we're preparing them for haven't been created yet. And what we've learned is that we're not so much, we're not just focusing on content mastery is insufficient in the preparation, that there's a kind of cross-cutting skills that they need to learn and demonstrate in practice, so that when they go out into the world, they can do it. And having people come in to engage students in conversations or to provide a perspective about, to give them feedback about their work, it sort of works well both ways, for the community to understand where the students are coming from, and for students to see possibly where they want to go towards. So school community is pretty wide. I mean, it could be parents and families, how do we get them more involved? And it can also be, how do we involve business and their role? And two quick examples: when I created an alternative school, we worked with students that were being lost in the system, and their families are not engaged in their lives. And so what we had to do is think about what was meaningful to the family that would want them to participate more in their lives. And part of that we determined was mealtime, that if we find a time when they could all get together, because many of these families, the dual income families, and they had crossing shifts, and we determined based on the majority of students there was a certain dining time between 3:30 and 5:30. And so we would set up that to schedule different kinds of meetings. And that made sense, and we would invite families not only to meet with the teachers, but if they had other children that they needed to be fed, this is a place where families could go. We had computer technology, so if we needed, students wanted to engage in, the younger children wanted to engage in that while the parents had a meeting, there were plenty of ways that there was an enrichment experience. So school as a place, as a resource for the community to come together around students, made sense. From a business perspective, I got into education when I managed a bookstore cafe. And what we did was we wanted to promote literacy in the school system. And so we sold books at our cost to the school system. It became part of the curriculum, and students came to where we were and they met the author. And they would engage in conversations about students engage about their experience with the book. The author would respond. We would give students a gift certificate to buy a book, and depending on the age, cookies and milk or coffee and cake, depending on their age. And that got around the entire city where other bookstores wanted to do it. And so within a couple of years, students who would not ordinarily go into a bookstore were going all over the city. And that was part of their place of belonging. And it felt good for businesses to participate that way because they could see what learning looked like for students. So I think context matters. I think the strength of leadership in the district, can really set a really interesting tone. And if someone is selected appropriately that understands the need of that, then a committee system makes sense. It's sort of like, what are the conditions that would allow a committee to focus on something that's just about, maybe not about more non-cognitive skill development, that makes sense, and that the committee has natural or legitimate authority over. And then how do they think intentionally as a community who should participate on that, and the purpose, and what kind of concrete outcomes they would like to be able to look at, to measure. So I believe that's achievable. I have seen it in districts where there has been strong leadership.
I did a series of case studies I wrote for the Maine Department of Education for their Center for Best Practice. And so I looked at 6 school districts, and in every one of the school districts who were picked because they were successful to some level or another in promoting change, this question always came up, the tension between the grassroots and the gardener. And I love the analogy that provokes because the gardener can never make the grass grow. The gardener can create the conditions, the gardener can increase the probability, but you can't just order the grass to grow or even say, grow harder, the way we typically do with kids. And so this was always, you have to come at it both ways, because if there's a failure in the grassroots, there won't be any ownership. And if there's a failure in the leadership, then as soon as the one person who's actually spearheading this leaves, then it'll disappear.
And so the idea is that if you want to move towards student-centered education, everyone's going to be giving up something, and students are going to be moving towards taking up, and that's going to feel different. And it's not going to feel perfect. It may even feel ugly. It may feel that you were losing control, but you may not be. And just to commit to it, trust the process that you're in, always question along, make adjustments as needed. But, if you are committed to students owning their learning, then we need to allow them to show us the way.